Hello and welcome to Volume 3 of this three-part video series about an inherited coin collection, the difficulties associated with navigating something that you may be experiencing for the first time. If you've watched the other two videos in this series, you know that I'm taking this journey pretty slowly. So if you have never experienced these things before, hopefully you can kind of learn from this as we're going along. I encourage you to take notes, stop the video whenever you feel like you need to. This is really designed for folks who have never really seen many of these pieces, if any of them, before. But my returning subscribers, you can be an invaluable resource by leaving comments and tips below. Again, I can't vouch for the validity of those tips, but I encourage those folks who are viewing this video for the first time, who are experiencing these pieces for the first time, to look through those notes below and see if they pertain to anything that you have questions about. If you're new to the channel, my name is Dub C. I want to thank you for being with me here today. If you're one of my returning subscribers, thank you guys as always. Again, you are an invaluable resource and I appreciate your comments down below. If you have interest in coins or precious metals, I encourage you to go ahead and click on that subscription button, become part of this community. Volumes 1 and 2 of this video series, we talked about the difficulties in acquiring a coin collection. If you have never heard or seen or experienced these pieces before, this can be very confusing, and it's my goal here to try to untangle some of those knots so you feel more comfortable going forward with however you are going to handle this collection in the future. With the other two videos, I began the video series with a very specific disclaimer, and I want to re-emphasize this. I am not a financial advisor. I am not trying to offer you financial advice. I'm just trying to share some of my experience having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years. But again, I need to stop you and reiterate that if you have questions, especially as they pertain to an estate, an inheritance, if you are dealing with tax implications, I want to make sure that you are talking with qualified financial advisors. I cannot possibly give you financial advice because I don't know what your situation is. And I encourage you to consult the appropriate legal professionals, tax professionals, financial professionals that can help you specifically with your situation. Again, we are just talking about the pitfalls and benefits of the pieces that you might find in a typical kind of casual American coin collection. The reason we have divided these into three different videos is because we're covering a lot of ground, but it's really important, especially in Volume 3. You have come to this video probably because you have gold coins or because you suspect you have gold coins. And gold coins have an entire different series of pitfalls and potential that separates them from the majority of the types of pieces you will find in a casually collected coin collection, even a collection that goes back 50, 60, 70 years. So that's the focus of this video. We're talking specifically about gold coins. In the previous video, I mentioned an acronym that I use, that is SCAD, the SCAD, for scads of coins. That is scarcity, condition, age, and desirability. Those are what impacts the value of coins. And I want to also reiterate that we don't clean coins. If you have inherited a coin collection, please go back and watch the other two videos if you haven't seen them before. I emphasized that coin collectors and coin dealers don't want shiny, bright, new coins. That's not what we're after. We're after the preservation of fine details, and you cannot restore those fine details by cleaning a coin, no matter what TikToks or other videos or articles you have seen. So I encourage you once again, go back and watch those other two videos if you haven't, but in the meantime, please don't clean your pieces, especially if you are going to ultimately be selling these pieces or having them appraised by a qualified appraiser. They will value them much more highly if they are not cleaned. Trust me on this. That's the one piece of advice I'm going to give you. So the definitions, there are essentially three different categories of gold coins that you may encounter. And I'm going to take this pretty slowly. Again, I encourage you to look through the notes down at the bottom of this video. We're going to talk about what we call pre-33 gold coins. those are the gold coins that actually circulated in the United States of America before gold ownership was strongly discouraged by an executive order that came out in 1933. These pieces are the ones that had circulated from the early part of the American journey, from all the way back in the 1700s, but really became much more available to the general public after the gold rush in 1849. So generally speaking, and again, I have to speak in generalities when we're talking about these types of pieces, because there are so many different variations, varieties, years, dates, mint marks, and everything else. These pieces would be the ones that you encountered if you were buying and selling anything of value from probably about the 1880s up until maybe the late 1920s. So that will be the focus of our section on pre-33 gold coins. Then we'll also talk very briefly about commemorative gold coins. These are pieces that became popular in the early 1980s and remain popular to a degree right now. These are pieces that are made by the United States Mint specifically for coin collectors. And they also commemorate specific events, dates, or activities. So they may have broader appeal for people outside of the coin collecting community. These commemoratives generally come in a $5 face value, and we'll talk about face values a little bit also. But they also can come in $10 face values and other values as well. And then finally, we'll talk about modern American bullion coins. Trying not to be any more confusing than I have to be, these pieces were made for people who wanted to own gold. And they weren't especially interested in collecting coins. They weren't interested in older pieces that have the potential for numismatic or coin collector value. These were just ways that the United States Mint produced gold coins for people who wanted to own gold. So we'll talk about all three of those categories, but we're going to start with classic or vintage or antique or pre-33. That's what we call it generally in the coin collecting and precious metals holding communities. These pieces, again, really came into focus after the gold rush. And I'll go in denominations and I'll show you the back and the front of these pieces, the obverse and the reverse. And my goal here is that you can slow this video down, you can stop the video, you can look at the images of the pieces that I'm showing you, and you can compare them to the pieces that you possibly have in your inherited gold collection. One of the unfortunate problems with this video is that I can't go deep into foreign coins, because really every country that existed from the middle of the 1800s up until the early 1900s probably produced their own gold coins too. Set those pieces aside. If there is interest, I will try to do a video on the most commonly encountered foreign gold coins. But for right now, again, we're going to focus on the American series. They really start with the smallest denomination you've probably ever seen before, and that would be the $1 gold piece. Again, these became popular really about the middle of the 1800s, and you can see just how tiny they are compared to my fingernail. These were a very small series. They don't contain very much gold at all. These pieces are really prized by collectors who have the desire for these pieces based on their numismatic or their coin collecting attraction. These pieces are, like all of the pieces I'm going to talk about, solid gold. They are 90% pure gold and 10% copper in the case of the pre-33 pieces. So you're looking at the front and you're looking at the back of these pieces. Compare them, contrast them to pieces in your own inherited collection. This will give you an idea of what an American $1 gold piece looks like. And again, these are solid gold, 90% pure gold, so they do have intrinsic value. Right now, the value of gold is somewhere around $2,700 per troy ounce. But remember that gold is a globally traded commodity, and that price rises and falls by the hour. While I'm filming, about $2,700 per troy ounce. So these pieces do have intrinsic value. They do have gold value. The next piece up is the $2.50 gold piece. If that sounds like a strange denomination, it is a strange denomination until you think that our dollars are usually kind of set aside in increments of 10. So this, in this case, in comparison to a $10 gold piece, which we will talk about, would be 1/4 of that. That's why the $2.50 increment here. This is a series that began in 1907 and continued up until the 1930s. We call this an Indian, and you can see the Indian with this fierce headdress. This is in Qs, which means that it's actually stamped below the surface of the coin. We made a $5 version of this piece as well. I'll show that to you in just a moment. So this is a $2.50 gold piece. When we're talking about values, these pieces do have collector value if they do have the benefits of SCAD, scarcity, condition, age, and demand. These pieces have about 0.12 of a troy ounce. So if you think of these in kind of rough increments, consider this to be roughly 1/10 of a troy ounce in value. If gold is trading at $2,700 per troy ounce, you can see that this, as roughly 1/10 of a troy ounce, contains about $270 worth of gold. That is a very rough, very thumbnail sketch, but it gives you an idea of the value, or the potential value at least, of these pieces. Again, a $2.50 gold piece. We're going to move along as quickly as we possibly can. This is the $5 gold piece from the same series. You can see the design is virtually identical, although the price down at the bottom, the face value down at the bottom, says $5 rather than $2.50. These pieces, the $5 gold piece, 0.242 of a troy ounce. 0.24 is very close to the 0.25, which would be 1/4 of a troy ounce. Again, you can start to see the intrinsic value, or the gold value. These pieces also came in a slightly older style. This is called the Liberty head style, or Liberty style, and we'll take a look at several other pieces in this series also. But again, we're starting with the lowest denomination going forward. This is a $5 gold piece. You can see down at the bottom it says United States, $5, United States of America, 5D. So that is a traditional $5 gold piece from the slightly older Liberty series. Now I should stop and mention that there are $3 gold pieces and $4 gold pieces also. Those are somewhat more scarce and not the kind of thing that you will find in a typical kind of casual coin collection. Those, because they are much more scarce, especially in the terms of the $4 gold piece, those are the kinds of things that you would find from a collector who was very serious about what they did. But these other pieces were not uncommon to be found in a collection that was pulled from circulation, especially if somebody was of an older generation. These were the kinds of pieces that they would have set aside because they too recognized the gold value. There is a $10 gold piece also. You can see how closely this mimicked that $1 gold piece we showed earlier and the Liberty $5 gold piece, but of course this one says 10D down below. These pieces, the $10 Liberty, 0.483 of a troy ounce. So while we're filming right now, these are very close to 1/2 of a troy ounce. You can start to see that increment creeping in. $1,300 roughly, the face value of these. Again, you're talking about, or rather the gold value of these. We're talking about the condition, the scarcity, the condition, the age of these pieces, and that is all significant. Again, please do not clean these pieces, and if you must hold them as I'm doing here, which is by the very edges, so I'm not putting my fingers across the surface of these pieces. This, a $10 gold piece of the Liberty series, again, from about the 1850s up until 1907 or so. So this is just about 1/2 of a troy ounce of pure gold. We're going to move right along. And just as with the other series, there was a different style that came out about the same period. This is the Indian version of the $10 gold piece. You can see the date here of 1908, a very popular series. This was designed by Augustus St. Gaudens, but you're looking at, again, this beautiful headdress. This is one of my personal favorite gold pieces. Again, the same dimensions, the same purity, the same weight as the Liberty $10 gold piece. So 0.483, or just about 1/2 of a troy ounce of pure gold. We're talking again about $1,300 in the gold value alone. Remember, we're just talking right now about the gold value because many of these pieces do have an additional collector or extrinsic value on top of that gold value. And then finally, we have our $20 gold pieces. This, the $20 gold Liberty. Again, you can see just how similar it was to the same series of pieces that came out at the same time this one did. 1850s, roughly up until the turn of the century, give or take. This is a 1904 dated piece. And you can see the dazzling reverse on this one, and it says $20 down below. So this piece, very close to a full troy ounce of gold. In fact, this is 0.967 of a troy ounce of gold, which means that with gold at roughly $2,700 as I'm filming today, this piece contains about $2,600 worth of gold. And then there was a slightly later version of the $20 gold piece also. This is a very popular coin called the St. Gaudens or Saint $20 double eagle. Another $20 gold piece. Now, one of the most confusing things for folks who especially who are new to this is that our modern bullion coins recycled this design, and that can be somewhat confusing. But I'll show you the difference between the two as we go a little bit deeper into these. This, a beautiful coin made from 1907 up until 1933. The most commonly encountered versions of these, also probably the 1908 and also maybe the late 1920s. Again, just about a full troy ounce of gold at 0.967. So its gold value alone right now, about $1,300 or $2,600, somewhere in that $2,600 range, very close to a full troy ounce of gold. So now you've seen examples of the most commonly encountered American classic gold coins. These pieces actually circulated in the United States up until 1933, but they continued to be held by many Americans who wanted to own precious metals. And once gold was allowed to be owned by Americans again without any restrictions, which was December 31st, 1974, so if you've got gold coins, don't worry about the authorities coming to take them. You are entitled to own gold now in this country. These are the kinds of pieces that would probably have been set aside by people who were of an older generation who were concerned about things like inflation. These are very common to this day for people to buy for their gold value alone. But they do also contain often some additional value in terms of their collectability. So the prices that I was talking about earlier are generally for their gold value alone. And remember, those weights are very rough estimates. You've got about 1/10 of an ounce, about 1/4 of an ounce, about 1/2 an ounce, and about a full ounce. A little bit less than, but very close to at least give you an idea of the intrinsic value of these pieces, the floor beneath which these will not go in terms of their value. Older examples in pristine condition can carry a significant premium, so keep that in mind. They can have even more value than that. And most importantly, there are lots of counterfeits, especially of the $2.50 Indian and the $5 Indian. These pieces were counterfeited very heavily in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, and lots of people would have had these as counterfeits without even realizing that they were counterfeit coins. They weren't made to deceive collectors. This was a way of making gold that was palatable, that was interesting and easy to understand for Americans, especially those Americans who were overseas in the 1940s, 1950s, even 1960s. They were made in large quantities in the Middle East. So if you or your family members, the person from whom you have inherited this collection, was in the military in this period of time, let's say right after World War II and beyond, if they traveled to Europe, if they were on business in the Middle East, and they potentially brought some of these pieces back home with them, or if they bought gold from a dealer at about this period of time, we didn't really realize the extent to which these had been made as counterfeits, and I have done an entire series about those. If you're interested, I'll leave a link down below. The point is that often the gold that was included in these is very close to the gold purity and the gold weight that they are supposed to be. But the gold value would be the bottom floor for these. They would have no additional collector value if they are counterfeit. Their legality to own, to try to sell, is a little bit gray, but the truth is that the gold contained within them, even if they are those older versions of counterfeits, is still probably very close, and in some cases even a little bit higher than it's supposed to be. So even the counterfeits of these pieces probably contain good gold. Keep that in mind also. The United States of America released commemorative gold pieces actually going back to the 19 teens. And the chances of you encountering those kinds of pieces, and again, in a casual collection, is a little bit less than you might expect. These pieces were really held by collectors. They didn't see circulation. They weren't made to circulate, even though they came out at essentially the same time as the pre-33 gold. So there are collectible commemorative pieces that were made specifically to commemorate a date, an event, something else. But these pieces also became popular right after Americans were allowed to own gold again in the early 1980s, and they remain popular to a degree to this day. So if your collector, the person from whom you are inheriting this collection, was collecting coins in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, there is at least the possibility that they will own some of these modern gold commemoratives, and I'll show you just a few of them. I emphasized in the previous videos that the Red Book, the United States Guide, the Guidebook to United States Coins, is an invaluable resource, and in this you can find examples of those older commemorative pieces, and you can also find examples of the newer commemoratives. I'll show you just a few examples so you can compare, and if they look like the pieces you have, set them aside, do a little bit more research. There is at least the possibility that those pieces are also gold. You're looking at really the first popular series of these modern commemoratives. These are the 1986 $5 gold pieces that were made to commemorate us working on the Statue of Liberty in the United States. You have a business strike here on the left and a proof strike here on the right. So these pieces, made to the same weight and purity as our classic $5 gold pieces that we just talked about. In the case of the $5 gold piece, 0.242 of a troy ounce of pure gold. Remember, that's pretty close to a quarter of a troy ounce of gold. And as I'm filming today, that means they have a gold value alone of about $650, about 1/4 of a troy ounce. These pieces often came in sets, and you're looking at a set that includes a silver dollar, a $50, and again, one of these $5 gold pieces. So if this set looks familiar, again, set it aside. If it's got a gold piece in it or a piece that looks like gold, there is at least the possibility that you have a modern gold commemorative also. And those pieces do have significant gold value as well. I should stop here and say that many replicas have been made over the years that mimic all of these pieces, whether they are counterfeits or they are made for collectors as an inexpensive way to own something that looks like a gold coin without having to pay money for it. Sometimes those pieces will contain the word copy or replica on them. That's actually legally what they are supposed to do, but unfortunately counterfeiters and those people who are involved in making fake coins don't play by the rules. So while some of them will say copy on them somewhere, and that can actually be somewhat difficult to find, most of the counterfeits that we see don't say replica on them. So just be aware that not everything in a fancy case that looks like a gold coin is going to be an actual gold coin. It definitely should be set aside for you to do a little bit more evaluation, maybe ask a qualified coin dealer to take a look at it. But these replicas can be a little bit tricky to pick out if you are not used to it. This being in a United States Mint box, a little bit easier to understand. These pieces are United States of America coins. These are not replicas. Just be aware that there are replicas, counterfeits, other pieces that are similar to that out there. When the United States of America was allowed to, the citizens were allowed to own gold again, in 1974, 1975, we were looking for gold in any way that we can, and that's why these commemoratives became quite popular. They were really America's first effort to make a gold coin again. But we did have a very short series that you do find sometimes in collections and that I have seen evaluating collections in the past. And I'm not going to go heavily into it, but it is an American art medallion series. And I'll show you a picture of one of those here. This was a very unpopular series that lasted from the early 1980s to the mid 1980s. These are 1 ounce gold medallions and 1/2 ounce gold medallions. So these pieces you will find sometimes in the collections of people who were interested in owning gold from about the 1980s on. The series ended in the middle of the 1980s. Again, was never very popular, but I have seen these before. They are 1 ounce, they are 1/2 ounce pure gold. They don't carry much of a premium unless they are in pristine condition, and even then, it can be hard to find collectors who are interested in those. So just as a quick aside, you might find these sometimes, but they are not very popular, and you probably won't see them in a casual collection. But we did, the United States of America, make gold coins for people who wanted to own gold after gold was allowed to be owned by Americans in 1974, 1975, and we call those the American Gold Eagle program. Now, here's that confusing thing that I talked about, and again, I have done an entire video that compares and contrasts the classic Augusta St. Gaudens $20 gold piece with the modern American Gold Eagle program. And of course, the United States of America decided to make these with the exact same design on the front of them, at least. And that's one of the reasons why these can be confusing. It doesn't help that the earlier versions of these have a date in Roman numerals, which can be a little bit difficult to understand also. But this is the easiest way for Americans who wanted to own an American gold coin. They were made out of 22 karat or 91.67% pure gold starting in 1986. And the United States Mint continues to make these to this day. In fact, some of the larger outlets like Costco has begun selling these recently. So these are available. You can find these. These are a very common thing to find in a collection of people who are interested in owning gold without really caring too much about classic vintage gold coin collecting. The modern American Gold Eagles, and again, this is the front of them. The design on the back changed not too long ago to a single eagle head. So this is called the family of eagles. I'll show a picture of one of those newer pieces, how the back looks on those also. You can see down below, this one actually says 1 ounce fine gold and $50. So that's one way that delineates it from the classic St. Gaudens, which was a $20 gold piece. I know it can be confusing. Take a look at them very carefully. See if you can tell the difference between the two. This piece made before 1933, this piece made after 1986 up until this day. These pieces come in fractional sizes as well. So you have examples of the 1/4 ounce American Gold Eagles and even the 1/10 ounce American Gold Eagles. And these pieces look very similar to the larger size. There are 1/2 ounce pieces as well. So a full ounce, 1/2 ounce, 1/4 ounce, and 1/10 ounce. And the nice thing is that they say on the backs of them exactly which ones you're looking at. This one says 1/4 ounce fine gold, $10. And this piece on the back, this little tiny piece, says 1/10 ounce fine gold, $5. These are non-circulating legal tender. You would never have spent these. They weren't made for circulation. Again, these were made well after gold was removed from our circulating coinage. The reason they have a face value has a lot to do with things like IRAs and investment accounts and taxes and tariffs, how the government sees these pieces. So for these pieces in particular, you're not so worried about the face value on them. They would never be spent. Frankly, you would never spend any of the classic gold pieces anymore either. But just be aware that the American Gold Eagle program begun in 1986. They do have face values, but those face values don't really count for anything. Please don't go spend a full troy ounce gold coin for $50. Don't deposit it in a bank. Those face values do not have any tie to reality. We're talking about gold having a face value or an ounce of value of about $2,700 per ounce right now. So each one of these would be valued somewhere in that $2,700 price. You would never spend something like that for $50. Don't put it in a Coinstar. Please don't deposit it in a bank account. These have to be sold through a dealer who will pay you their full face value if you and your financial advisors have come to the conclusion that it's time for you to liquidate this coin collection. So we've talked about some of the pieces that you may encounter. There was another series that came out in the early 2000s, actually 2008. That's the American Gold Buffalo series, and it too is just a way for Americans or anybody to own gold. These came in smaller fractions too, in a very specific smaller amount. You're looking at a copy of an American Gold Buffalo here. These are traditionally 1 troy ounce of gold, but unlike the modern American Eagles, rather than being 91.67% pure, the American Gold Buffaloes are 0.9999 pure gold, so they are very pure gold. They each contain an ounce of gold, and it's very important to understand that when you're looking at the American Eagle program, the 1 troy ounce, the 1/2 troy ounce, the 1/4 ounce, and the 1/10 ounce each contain that much gold. Even though the gold is slightly less pure, it contains more volume. They weigh more than they're supposed to in order to account for the alloy of different metals that are mixed in with them. The same is true of the American Buffalo. It contains 1 troy ounce unless you have some of those slightly more scarce fractional versions of the American Gold Buffalo. We've got classic American gold coins. Again, slow down the video, stop the video, compare them to the pieces that you have. We've talked about some of the modern American commemorative pieces that started coming out in the 1980s and are still produced to this day. Your red book is your best friend here because you can look up those pieces in the back. There's a section on the commemorative pieces from the United States of America. We've talked about the American Gold Eagle program, which started in 1986 and continues to this day. And we talked a little bit about the American Gold Buffalo program. It's a very similar series of coins designed not for collectors, but really for people who just want to own physical gold. It is not unusual to encounter any of these in an inherited gold collection, especially if that person was buying a little bit earlier from the 1980s on back all the way to the 1930s. There are specially designed pieces made for collectors of all of these series. We talked about briefly the difference between a proof coin, you can see those reflective surfaces, versus a business strike. You do find proof versions of the American Eagles. They may have slightly more collector value. There are proof versions of the American Gold Buffalo series. They may have slightly more value for collectors. And there are specific dates of all of these that can be quite rare. That's especially true of the classic pieces. There are pieces that have a much, much higher premium. They are worth more as collectibles than they are as gold. Remember, in the case of these pieces, we were speaking specifically about their intrinsic or gold value, but be very careful if you suspect that you have a rare date and a rare mint mark. Again, take a very close look at the red book. These only cost about $20. You can buy them at a local coin shop. You can buy them online through Amazon. Spend a little bit of time kind of orienting yourself on how to use something like this. Look at those mintages. That's your key. The first key, at least, to determining whether or not something has potential value. If the mintage on these pieces is smaller than the other pieces around it, especially if that mintage is quite low, remember the mintage is just the number of pieces that the mint made, then there is, again, at least a small possibility that these pieces will have a greater value based on their collectability and not just on their gold content. But you can see the floor value of the gold content of these pieces alone can be significant. Really briefly run down, we're talking about the 2.5, 0.121 of a troy ounce, so about $325 as I'm filming. The $5 gold piece, right about 0.242 of a troy ounce, about $650. The $10 gold piece, about 0.483 of a troy ounce, so about $1,300. And these classic $20 gold pieces, really close to a full troy ounce at 0.967. with a gold value alone of about $2,600. Please keep that in mind. If you have questions about any of these pieces that you see here, I encourage you to pick up the red book, take a very close look at it. If you remember from the previous videos, we talked about some of the ways that you can deaccession or possibly sell these pieces, and I'll put a link to those videos down below. Refresh yourself with the auction companies that may take these on for you. I talked about the benefits and pitfalls of selling to local dealers. Refresh that information in your mind. If your financial advisors and your tax advisors have said that it's okay for you to sell these pieces and that's the path that you want to pursue, Again, I'd like to reiterate that I am a coin collector and have been my entire life. So if these pieces are interesting to you, it's important to note their potential value, but if you can hold on to them, that's a nice way to pay tribute to the person from who you collected them and maybe pass them on to the next generation as well. If you have ideas about other videos you'd like to see me make in the Inherited Coin Collection video series or any other series, leave that comment down below. I'll be happy to respond if I possibly can. If you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, and this is something that you have a prolonged interest in, and I would love to encourage you to look through some of the other titles of the series and videos that I've made. Coin collecting is a fascinating hobby with lots of positive benefits. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel, look through the other options. Love to have you be part of this community. And always be learning, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as we go deeper into the world of coins and physical precious metals.